There are stories that arrive like thunder, loud and immediate, and then there are stories that move like smoke, quiet, invasive, slowly filling the spaces we didn't know were empty. In the Gray, 2026, feels like the latter, a film that does not announce itself with spectacle alone, but with a kind of emotional fog that settles over its characters and its audience alike. It is a story about men who operate in moral ambiguity, where right and wrong are not opposites, but currencies constantly traded in the marketplace of survival. And from its very first breath, the film positions itself not just as entertainment, but as an exploration of control, risk, and the invisible economics of human conflict. At its core, the film appears to follow a covert unit operating in the blurred boundaries of international intelligence, where missions are not defined by victory, but by acceptable loss. The narrative seems structured around a high-stakes extraction or neutralization operation that spirals into something far more complex, forcing its central figures to confront not just external enemies, but the internal cost of their decisions. This is not a battlefield defined by geography, but by psychology, where every decision carries both a tactical consequence and an emotional liability. From an industry perspective, In the Gray represents a calculated investment in the action thriller genre, a space that consistently attracts strong global box office performance when paired with recognizable talent and grounded realism. With an estimated production budget likely in the range of $80 to $120 million, approximate, the film operates within a financial bracket that demands both spectacle and discipline. It is not a reckless gamble, but a structured bet, designed to maximize ROI through international appeal, streaming longevity, and franchise potential. What makes this project particularly interesting is the balance between star power and directorial control. Films like this often rely on the gravitational pull of their lead actors to secure pre-release distribution deals, effectively reducing investor risk before a single frame is shot. This transforms the film into a hybrid financial instrument, part creative expression, part pre-sold asset, where casting decisions directly influence projected revenue curves. In that sense, every performance becomes not just an artistic contribution, but a line item in a larger financial model. Technologically, the film is expected to lean heavily into modern digital cinema workflows, likely utilizing high dynamic range cameras such as the ARRI Alexa LF or similar large-format systems. These tools allow filmmakers to capture nuanced lighting conditions, especially important for a film that lives in shadows, tension, and subdued environments. The visual language here is not about bright spectacle, but about controlled darkness, where what you cannot see becomes just as important as what you can. The creative gamble lies in tone. Films operating in moral gray zones risk alienating audiences that seek clear heroes and villains. However, they also unlock a deeper level of engagement, particularly among viewers who value psychological complexity and narrative realism. This is where the film's economic strategy intersects with its artistic ambition. By targeting a more mature, globally literate audience, the film positions itself for higher-value advertising categories, including technology, finance, and premium streaming platforms. There is also an underlying question of scalability. If In the Gray succeeds, it is not just a single film, but a potential intellectual property engine. The world it builds, the systems it hints at, the unresolved moral frameworks, all of these can be extended into sequels, spin-offs, or even serialized adaptations. In modern cinema economics, this is where true value lies, not just in opening weekend numbers, but in long-term content ecosystems. And yet, beneath all this structure, all this planning, all this financial modeling, there remains something deeply human at the center. Because stories like this are not remembered for their budgets or their box office charts. They are remembered for the moments where a character hesitates, where a decision lingers, where silence says more than dialogue ever could. That is the real investment, the emotional capital that determines whether a film is simply watched or truly experienced. In that sense, In the Gray is not just a film about operations and outcomes. It is about the cost of existing in spaces where clarity is a luxury, and certainty is a myth. It invites us into a world where every choice is a negotiation, every alliance is temporary, and every mission leaves something behind that cannot be measured in numbers. And as we begin to explore its narrative, its structure, and its layered construction, what becomes clear is that this is not just a story unfolding on screen. It is a system, carefully designed, financially engineered, and emotionally calibrated, to examine what happens when humans are placed in environments where the rules are constantly shifting, and the only constant is uncertainty. As the narrative moves beyond its atmospheric opening, the first half of the film begins to function like a carefully structured startup phase, where the foundation is not just built, but stress-tested in real time. We are introduced to a tightly controlled operational unit, each member carrying a specific role, much like a founding team assembled for a high-risk venture. Their mission appears straightforward on paper, likely an extraction, a surveillance operation, or a targeted neutralization, but the film quickly establishes that simplicity is an illusion. Every briefing feels less like instruction and more like a negotiation with uncertainty. The pacing in this early phase is deliberate, almost restrained, which is a strategic storytelling decision. Instead of rushing into action, the film invests heavily in context building, allowing the audience to understand the operational ecosystem. This includes command hierarchies, communication protocols, and the invisible pressure of accountability. In economic terms, this is the R&D stage of the narrative, where time is spent refining variables before the product is launched into the chaos of execution. The film understands that emotional investment, much like financial investment, requires trust, and trust must be earned gradually. One of the most effective elements here is how the film introduces friction early. Small inconsistencies in intelligence, subtle disagreements between team members, and moments of hesitation begin to surface. These are not dramatic explosions of conflict, but quiet indicators of systemic instability. In startup language, this is where early warning signals appear, metrics that suggest the model may not perform as expected under real-world conditions. The audience begins to sense that the mission is operating on incomplete data, which immediately raises the stakes without needing overt spectacle. The characters themselves are positioned as both assets and liabilities. Each individual brings a unique skill set, tactical expertise, psychological resilience, but also personal bias, emotional baggage, and decision-making tendencies shaped by past experiences. The film subtly explores how these human variables influence operational efficiency. A moment of hesitation, a deviation from protocol, or even an overconfidence in one's judgment can shift the entire trajectory of the mission. This is where the narrative begins to align deeply with behavioral economics, showing how irrational human factors impact systems designed for precision. As the mission transitions from planning to execution, the film gradually increases its tempo. The environments become more unpredictable, communication becomes more fragmented, and the margin for error begins to shrink. This escalation is handled with precision, ensuring that each development feels like a logical progression rather than an artificial spike in tension. It mirrors the transition from prototype to live deployment, where theoretical models are suddenly exposed to real-world volatility. A particularly compelling aspect of this first half is how it manages information flow. The audience is not given complete clarity, and this is intentional. Just like the characters, we are operating with partial visibility, forced to interpret signals, body language, and fragmented data. This creates a shared psychological experience, aligning the viewer's uncertainty with that of the characters. It is a powerful technique that transforms passive viewing into active engagement. The film also introduces early consequences, but in controlled doses. Minor setbacks, unexpected obstacles, and shifts in mission parameters begin to accumulate. These are not catastrophic failures, but they serve as proof that the system is under strain. In financial terms, this is where early losses are incurred, manageable, but indicative of deeper vulnerabilities. The audience begins to question not whether the mission will succeed, but at what cost. Visually and emotionally, the first half maintains a tone of restrained tension. There is a constant sense that something is slightly off, that the operation is moving forward, but not in the way it was originally intended. This creates a slow-burning intensity, where anticipation becomes the primary driver of engagement. The film resists the temptation to deliver immediate gratification, instead choosing to build a layered foundation that will support the heavier emotional and narrative weight of the second half. By the midpoint, the film reaches what can be described as its prototype breakpoint. This is the moment where the initial assumptions of the mission are challenged in a significant way. Perhaps the target is not what it seemed, or the objective shifts under external pressure, or a betrayal, subtle or overt, begins to surface. Whatever the trigger, it forces the characters to reassess their strategy, revealing that the original plan was built on unstable ground. What makes this transition effective is that it feels earned. The groundwork laid in the earlier sequences ensures that this shift is not a surprise for the sake of shock, but a natural consequence of the variables introduced. It reinforces the film's central idea that in complex systems, failure is rarely sudden. It is gradual, built from a series of small miscalculations that eventually converge into a critical turning point. And as the first half draws to a close, there is a palpable shift in energy. The controlled environment of planning has given way to the unpredictable reality of execution. The characters are no longer operating with confidence, but with adaptation, constantly recalibrating their decisions in response to new information. This marks the end of the setup phase and prepares the narrative for a deeper exploration of consequence, where every choice made so far begins to demand its return. As the second half begins, the film transitions from controlled execution into full system stress, where every assumption built in the first half is now tested under pressure. The operation is no longer about achieving objectives efficiently, but about surviving the consequences of earlier decisions. What once felt like a structured mission now resembles a collapsing framework, where each action triggers unpredictable reactions. This shift is crucial, because it transforms the narrative from planning and deployment into consequence management, the phase where real value, both emotional and financial, is either realized or lost. The pacing accelerates, but not in a chaotic way. Instead, it becomes tighter, more urgent, reflecting a system that is running out of margin for error. Communication begins to fracture, alliances feel less stable, and trust becomes a diminishing resource. In economic terms, this is the moment when liquidity dries up, when flexibility disappears, and decisions must be made with incomplete data and limited time. The film uses this pressure to amplify emotional engagement, ensuring that every scene carries weight, not just in terms of action, but in terms of psychological impact. One of the defining strengths of this phase is how it handles payoff structure. Every detail introduced earlier, every hesitation, every minor inconsistency, now begins to return with amplified consequences. The film rewards attentive viewing, creating a sense that nothing was wasted, that every narrative investment made in the first half is now generating returns. This is where storytelling aligns with product-market fit, delivering on the promises made during the setup while still introducing enough unpredictability to maintain tension. The characters, now stripped of the illusion of control, are forced into adaptive behavior. Their decisions become more instinctive, more emotionally driven, yet paradoxically more revealing of their true nature. Under pressure, we begin to see who leads, who follows, who fractures, and who evolves. This is where the film's psychological layer deepens, showing that crisis does not create character, it exposes it. Each choice becomes a reflection of internal priorities, survival, loyalty, or self-preservation. There is also a noticeable shift in how the film treats space and environment. Locations that once felt strategic and manageable now appear unpredictable and hostile. The same spaces are recontextualized through urgency and threat, reinforcing the idea that environment is not static, it is shaped by perception and circumstance. This transformation adds a layer of visual storytelling that mirrors the internal chaos of the characters. Midway through this second half, the narrative likely introduces a major inflection point, a moment where the mission's original objective becomes secondary to a more immediate, often personal, goal. This could manifest as a betrayal revealed, a hidden agenda exposed, or a moral line crossed that cannot be undone. In business terms, this is the pivot, the moment where the original strategy is abandoned in favor of a survival-driven alternative. It is risky, unpredictable, but necessary. The emotional intensity reaches its peak here, not through constant action, but through the weight of decisions. Silence becomes more powerful than dialogue, and hesitation becomes more dangerous than movement. The film understands that tension is not just about what happens, but about what might happen, and it uses this uncertainty to keep the audience fully engaged. As the narrative approaches its climax, the concept of cost becomes central. Not just financial cost, but emotional, psychological, and ethical cost. The characters are no longer asking whether they can complete the mission, but whether completing it is worth what they have already lost. This reframing is critical, because it shifts the stakes from external success to internal consequence. The climax itself is likely constructed as a convergence point, where all narrative threads, operational, emotional, and thematic, intersect. It is not just about resolution, but about revelation. The truth behind the mission, the real motivations of those involved, and the hidden structure of the system are brought into focus. This is where the film delivers its most concentrated form of meaning, forcing both characters and audience to confront the reality of what has unfolded. Importantly, the resolution does not aim for complete closure. Instead, it leaves space for reflection, acknowledging that in systems defined by ambiguity, outcomes are rarely clean. Some questions remain unanswered, some consequences remain unresolved, and some costs continue beyond the frame. This is not a failure of storytelling, but a deliberate choice, reinforcing the film's commitment to realism. By the end of the second half, the narrative has completed its transformation from a controlled operation into an exploration of uncertainty, consequence, and adaptation. The audience is left not with a sense of victory or defeat, but with a deeper understanding of the systems, both external and internal, that shape human behavior under pressure. It is this layered payoff, emotional, psychological, and structural, that defines the film's product-market fit, ensuring that its impact extends beyond the immediate viewing experience. As the film moves beyond the mechanics of plot and consequence, it begins to reveal its most intricate layer, the psychology of decision-making under pressure. In The Grey constructs its characters not as traditional heroes or villains, but as adaptive agents operating within constrained systems, where every choice carries both a visible outcome and an invisible cost. What we witness is not just behavior, but calculation, a constant weighing of options shaped by fear, loyalty, and survival instinct. At the center of this system is a leader figure, someone tasked with making decisions in environments where certainty does not exist. Leadership here is not portrayed as confidence, but as burden. Every command issued is essentially a financial transaction of risk, where the leader allocates human capital in exchange for uncertain outcomes. The psychological weight of this responsibility becomes evident in moments of hesitation, where silence reflects not indecision, but the awareness of irreversible consequences. This aligns closely with loss aversion, a principle where the fear of losing outweighs the potential of gaining. The team surrounding this central figure operates within their own psychological frameworks. Some exhibit risk-seeking behavior, driven by experience or overconfidence, willing to push boundaries in pursuit of success. Others display risk-averse tendencies, prioritizing safety and control, even when it conflicts with mission objectives. This diversity creates internal tension, a microeconomy of conflicting strategies where consensus is fragile and disagreement is inevitable. The film subtly explores how these differing risk profiles impact group dynamics and operational efficiency. Trauma plays a significant role in shaping behavior. These are individuals who have likely been exposed to repeated high-stress environments, and their responses are conditioned by past outcomes. A previous failure may lead to excessive caution, while a past success may breed overconfidence. This creates feedback loops, where historical experience influences present decisions, often without conscious awareness. The film captures this through small behavioral cues, a pause before action, a glance exchanged, a deviation from protocol that hints at deeper psychological patterns. One of the most compelling aspects is the concept of moral accounting. The characters constantly negotiate between what is necessary and what is acceptable. In environments where rules are flexible, morality becomes a personal ledger, where actions are justified, deferred, or suppressed depending on context. This creates a tension between professional obligation and personal conscience, forcing characters to assign value to outcomes that cannot be easily measured. The film also examines authority and trust as economic constructs. Authority is not absolute, it must be maintained through competence and results. Trust, on the other hand, is a fragile currency, built slowly and lost quickly. When information becomes unreliable or intentions are questioned, trust begins to erode, and with it, the efficiency of the entire system. The narrative shows how quickly a well-functioning unit can destabilize when these intangible assets are compromised. Under pressure, decision-making shifts from analytical to instinctive. Time constraints reduce the ability to process information fully, forcing characters to rely on heuristics, mental shortcuts shaped by experience. While these can be efficient, they also introduce bias, leading to errors that may not have occurred under calmer conditions. The film highlights this transition, showing how urgency compresses thought and amplifies the impact of every decision. There is also an exploration of opportunity cost, the idea that choosing one path inherently means sacrificing another. In high-stakes environments, this cost is often human. Saving one person may endanger another, completing the mission may require abandoning a teammate, and preserving the system may demand personal sacrifice. These decisions are not presented as clear right or wrong, but as unavoidable trade-offs within a constrained system. The interpersonal relationships within the team further complicate these dynamics. Loyalty can both strengthen and weaken decision-making. A leader may hesitate to risk a trusted team member, even when logic demands it. Conversely, emotional detachment may improve efficiency but erode morale. The film navigates this balance carefully, showing that the most effective decisions are not always the most human, and the most human decisions are not always the most effective. As the narrative progresses, we begin to see how prolonged exposure to this environment alters identity itself. Characters are no longer just making decisions, they are becoming the sum of those decisions. The boundaries between personal and professional begin to blur, creating a psychological state where actions are justified not by morality, but by necessity. This transformation is subtle but profound, illustrating how systems shape individuals over time. Ultimately, this step of the film functions as a behavioral study, an examination of how humans operate when placed inside high-pressure, high-stakes systems. It reveals that behind every strategic move lies a complex web of psychological influences, and that understanding these influences is key to decoding not just the characters, but the system they inhabit. In doing so, the film elevates itself from a narrative about action to a deeper exploration of human behavior under constraint. As we move into the financial core of the film, what emerges is not just a production, but a carefully engineered capital allocation event. In the Gray operates within a budget bracket that likely sits between $90 to $120 million, approximate, positioning it in that critical mid to high tier where profitability depends not just on scale, but on precision. This is not an experimental indie risk, nor a $250 million franchise gamble. It is a controlled investment, where studios expect disciplined execution, predictable audience pull, and strong international performance to justify the capital deployed. From an investor's perspective, the film functions as a diversified asset. Theatrical release remains the primary visibility engine, but the real financial model extends far beyond opening weekend. Revenue streams include global box office, digital rentals, streaming licensing deals, and long-tail television syndication. In modern cinema economics, the box office is often just the first checkpoint, not the final verdict. A film like this is designed to generate multi-phase ROI, where each distribution window unlocks additional layers of revenue. The break-even logic for a project in this range typically follows a multiplier model. With a production budget of around $100 million, approximate, and marketing costs potentially adding another $60 to $80 million, approximate, the total investment may approach $160 to $180 million, approximate. To reach profitability, the film would likely need to generate at least 2.5x its production budget globally, placing the break-even threshold somewhere in the $250 to $300 million range, approximate. Everything beyond that begins to shift the project from recovery into profit generation. Marketing, in this context, becomes a strategic force multiplier rather than just a promotional tool. Campaigns for films like this are carefully timed and segmented, often beginning months in advance with teaser trailers designed to establish tone rather than reveal plot. These are followed by full trailers that introduce stakes, star presence, and emotional hooks. The goal is not just awareness, but conversion, turning impressions into ticket sales through targeted messaging. A key component of this strategy is demographic targeting. Action thrillers with psychological depth tend to perform well across multiple audience segments, particularly in Tier 1 markets where viewers are drawn to narratives that combine spectacle with intellectual engagement. This opens the door to premium advertising categories, including finance, technology, and education brands, which typically command higher CPM rates. In this way, the film's thematic depth directly contributes to its monetization potential. Pre-release revenue mechanisms also play a crucial role in reducing risk. International distribution rights are often sold ahead of release, locking in guaranteed income regardless of box office performance. Streaming platforms may secure post-theatrical rights, providing an additional financial cushion. These deals effectively transform portions of the film's future revenue into present-day capital, improving cash flow and reducing exposure for investors. Star power, once again, becomes a measurable financial variable. Well-known actors not only attract audiences but also increase the film's negotiating power in distribution deals. Their involvement can raise projected revenue forecasts, making the project more attractive to partners and investors. In financial terms, they function as brand assets, enhancing both perceived and actual value. Another important factor is global market performance. Films in this genre often derive a significant portion of their revenue from international territories, sometimes exceeding domestic earnings. Markets such as China, Europe, and parts of Asia can dramatically influence total gross, making global appeal a critical design consideration during both production and marketing phases. Merchandising and ancillary products, while not the primary focus for a film of this tone, still contribute to the overall revenue ecosystem. Digital collectibles, limited edition releases, and branded collaborations can extend the film's financial footprint beyond traditional channels. These are not core drivers, but they add incremental value, particularly in long-term monetization. The concept of EBITDA, while more commonly associated with corporate finance, can be loosely applied here to understand operational profitability. After accounting for production, marketing, distribution costs, and exhibitor splits, the remaining revenue represents the film's true financial performance. A well-managed project in this category aims to maintain healthy margins by controlling costs without compromising quality. Ultimately, In the Gray can be understood as a financial system as much as a narrative one. Every creative decision, from casting to tone to pacing, is interconnected with economic outcomes. The film's success will not be measured solely by its artistic merit, but by its ability to balance investment, risk, and return. And in that balance lies the true story behind the story, a reminder that cinema, at its highest level, is not just about what we see on screen, but about the intricate financial machinery that makes it possible. Beneath the surface of narrative and performance, In the Gray is fundamentally a product of technological orchestration, where every frame is the result of deliberate engineering choices. The film is likely built on a modern digital cinema pipeline, anchored by large-format sensors such as the ARRI Alexa LF or comparable systems. These cameras are not just tools of capture, they are instruments of interpretation, designed to translate light into emotional data with exceptional dynamic range. In a film that thrives on shadow, ambiguity, and controlled contrast, this choice becomes central to how the audience experiences tension. Lens selection plays an equally critical role in shaping perception. The use of anamorphic or large-format spherical lenses would allow the filmmakers to manipulate depth, compression, and distortion in subtle ways. Wide lenses can create a sense of exposure and vulnerability, while longer focal lengths compress space, intensifying isolation and surveillance-like tension. This is not random aesthetic preference, but a calculated decision to align optical physics with psychological storytelling. Lighting design in a film like this becomes an exercise in restraint. Instead of flooding scenes with illumination, the production likely leans into low-key lighting, using shadows as narrative devices. Practical light sources, lamps, screens, distant streetlights, are integrated into the environment to maintain realism while controlling visual focus. The absence of light becomes just as expressive as its presence, reinforcing the film's thematic commitment to uncertainty and hidden information. The color grading pipeline, often executed through platforms like DaVinci Resolve, transforms raw footage into a cohesive visual language. Here, color is not merely corrected, but sculpted. Muted palettes, desaturated tones, and controlled highlights can create a world that feels grounded yet emotionally distant. Subtle shifts in color temperature may be used to differentiate psychological states, cooler tones for detachment, warmer tones for fleeting moments of connection. This is where technology meets emotion, where numerical adjustments translate into human feeling. Editing, handled through systems such as Avid Media Composer, defines the rhythm of the film. In a narrative built on tension, pacing is everything. Cuts are not just transitions, they are decisions about what information to reveal and when. Longer takes can build unease, forcing the audience to sit within a moment, while rapid cuts can simulate urgency and fragmentation. The editor becomes a silent architect of experience, shaping time itself to align with the film's psychological intent. Sound technology, though often discussed separately, is deeply integrated into the filmmaking process. On-set recording, ADR, and post-production mixing through platforms like Avid Pro Tools ensure that every auditory element is precisely controlled. Even in scenes of silence, there is rarely true absence of sound. Subtle ambient layers, distant echoes, and low-frequency tones are engineered to maintain immersion. This creates an auditory environment that complements the visual tension, reinforcing the film's atmosphere. Visual effects, while likely restrained compared to large-scale blockbusters, still play a significant role. Modern CGI pipelines allow for seamless integration of enhancements that are often invisible to the audience. This could include environmental extensions, digital cleanup, or subtle augmentations that enhance realism without drawing attention. The goal is not spectacle, but invisibility, ensuring that the technology supports the narrative without overpowering it. Data workflows are another critical component. High-resolution digital capture generates vast amounts of data, requiring efficient storage, transfer, and backup systems. On-set data wrangling ensures that footage is securely managed, while post-production pipelines coordinate editing, color grading, and visual effects across multiple teams. This is essentially a digital supply chain, where information flows through various stages, each adding value before the final product is assembled. The integration of monitoring systems also influences performance and direction. Real-time playback, high-resolution monitors, and on-set color previews allow directors and cinematographers to make immediate adjustments. This reduces uncertainty and improves efficiency, ensuring that creative decisions are validated during production rather than corrected later. It is a feedback loop that enhances both artistic control and cost management. Another emerging aspect is the use of virtual production techniques, though likely in a limited capacity for this film. LED volume stages and real-time rendering engines can provide controlled environments for complex scenes, reducing the need for extensive location shoots. Even if used sparingly, these technologies represent a shift toward more predictable and efficient production models. Ultimately, the technological framework of In the Gray is not just about achieving visual fidelity, but about enabling a specific kind of storytelling. Every camera choice, every lens, every lighting setup, and every line of code in post-production contributes to a unified objective, translating ambiguity, tension, and psychological depth into a sensory experience. This is where filmmaking becomes engineering, and where technology becomes the silent language through which emotion is delivered. As we step into the operational backbone of the film, what becomes clear is that In the Gray is not just a creative endeavor, but a complex project management system, where time, labor, and coordination are constantly optimized under financial pressure. Every day on set represents a measurable burn rate, often running into hundreds of thousands of dollars, making scheduling not just a logistical concern, but a direct financial variable. In this environment, time is not abstract, it is capital, and every delay carries a quantifiable cost. The production likely follows a tightly controlled shooting schedule, often spanning 60 to 90 days, approximate, depending on location complexity and action requirements. Each day is broken down into call sheets, detailing scenes, locations, cast availability, and technical requirements. This level of precision mirrors corporate project planning, where tasks are sequenced to maximize efficiency and minimize downtime. A missed setup or delayed actor arrival does not just disrupt the day, it cascades through the schedule, affecting future scenes and inflating costs. Leadership hierarchy on set plays a critical role in maintaining this efficiency. The director functions as the creative CEO, responsible for vision and final decision-making, while the first assistant director acts as the operational manager, ensuring that the schedule is adhered to. Department heads, cinematography, production design, sound, costume, operate as specialized units within this larger system, each with their own teams and workflows. This structure allows for parallel processing, where multiple elements are prepared simultaneously to keep production moving forward. Resource allocation is another key aspect. Equipment, locations, and personnel must be coordinated in a way that avoids bottlenecks. For example, a complex action sequence may require stunt teams, special effects units, and multiple camera setups, all of which must be synchronized. This is not unlike managing a large-scale industrial operation, where different departments must align perfectly to produce a single output. Any misalignment can lead to costly reshoots or compromised quality. Location management adds another layer of complexity. Films like this often shoot across multiple environments, urban settings, remote landscapes, controlled interiors, each with its own logistical challenges. Permits, transportation, accommodation, and local regulations must all be handled efficiently. In financial terms, location changes introduce variable costs, making it essential to cluster scenes geographically when possible to reduce travel and setup expenses. Labor dynamics also play a significant role. Film crews are often unionized, with strict rules regarding working hours, overtime, and safety conditions. While these regulations ensure fair treatment, they also introduce constraints that must be carefully managed. Exceeding scheduled hours can lead to increased costs, making time management even more critical. This creates a balance between maintaining morale and controlling expenses, a challenge familiar to any large organization. Contingency planning is an essential part of production management. Weather disruptions, equipment failures, or unexpected creative changes can derail schedules if not anticipated. Productions typically allocate contingency budgets and buffer days to absorb these shocks. This is analogous to risk management in corporate projects, where unforeseen variables are accounted for in advance to protect overall timelines and budgets. Communication systems underpin the entire operation. Clear and consistent information flow between departments ensures that everyone is aligned. Miscommunication can lead to duplicated efforts, missed cues, or technical errors, all of which translate into wasted time and money. The production environment relies on both formal channels, such as meetings and reports, and informal coordination on set to maintain coherence. Post-production planning is often integrated into the production phase itself. Editors may begin assembling footage while shooting is still ongoing, allowing for early identification of missing elements or continuity issues. This parallel workflow improves efficiency and reduces the likelihood of expensive reshoots later. It reflects a forward-thinking approach, where downstream processes are considered during upstream execution. Budget control remains a constant priority throughout this phase. Line producers and production managers track expenditures daily, comparing actual costs against projections. Any deviation must be addressed quickly to prevent overruns. This requires a combination of financial discipline and creative flexibility, ensuring that cost-saving measures do not compromise the film's core vision. Ultimately, the production management of In the Gray can be seen as a real-time balancing act between creativity and constraint. It is a system where artistic ambition must coexist with financial discipline, and where every decision, no matter how small, contributes to the overall outcome. By examining this layer, we gain insight into how large-scale cinematic experiences are not just imagined, but meticulously constructed through coordination, planning, and execution. As the film expands beyond its operational and psychological layers, it begins to invite a deeper question: how much of what we are watching reflects reality, and how much is shaped by narrative necessity? In the Gray appears to position itself within a semi-realistic framework, drawing inspiration from real-world intelligence operations while allowing room for cinematic interpretation. This balance between fact and fiction is not accidental, but a strategic choice designed to maximize both credibility and engagement. From a historical standpoint, covert operations have always existed in the margins of public knowledge, where documentation is limited and transparency is rare. This creates a unique challenge for filmmakers. Without fully accessible records, authenticity must be constructed through research, consultation, and informed imagination. Films in this genre often rely on former military or intelligence advisors to ground their portrayal in plausible procedure, even if specific details are altered for narrative clarity. The chain of command depicted in such films typically reflects real-world structures, hierarchical, disciplined, and defined by clear lines of authority. However, the speed at which decisions are made on screen is often accelerated for dramatic effect. In reality, operations of this scale involve layers of approval, risk assessment, and contingency planning that unfold over extended periods. The film compresses this timeline, not to distort truth, but to maintain narrative momentum. Technologically, many of the tools shown, surveillance systems, encrypted communication, drone reconnaissance, are grounded in existing capabilities. Modern intelligence agencies do operate with advanced data analysis systems, real-time monitoring, and global communication networks. However, the level of seamless integration often portrayed in films tends to be idealized. In reality, systems can be fragmented, data can be delayed, and human interpretation remains a critical factor. One of the more nuanced aspects of accuracy lies in human behavior. The psychological responses depicted, stress, hesitation, moral conflict, are often more authentic than the operational details themselves. Studies in high-pressure environments show that decision-making under stress is rarely perfectly rational. Cognitive load, fatigue, and emotional factors all influence outcomes. In this sense, the film's focus on internal conflict may be more realistic than its depiction of external precision. The concept of rules of engagement is another area where realism and dramatization intersect. In actual operations, these rules are defined by legal frameworks and international agreements, often imposing strict limitations on the use of force. Films may simplify or bypass these constraints to maintain narrative flow, but they still echo the underlying tension between authority and accountability. This tension is essential to understanding the ethical landscape in which such operations occur. Environmental realism also plays a role. Locations, whether urban conflict zones or remote landscapes, are often chosen to reflect plausible operational settings. Production design teams work to recreate textures, architecture, and cultural details that align with real-world environments. While not always exact, These elements contribute to a sense of authenticity that supports audience immersion. Scientific accuracy, particularly in areas like ballistics, communication technology, and tactical movement, is typically approached with a balance of realism and accessibility. Too much technical detail can alienate general audiences, while too little can undermine credibility. The film likely navigates this by presenting simplified versions of complex systems, enough to feel believable, but not so detailed as to disrupt pacing. Another important dimension is the portrayal of intelligence gathering. In reality, actionable intelligence is often the result of prolonged data collection, analysis, and cross-referencing. Films tend to condense this process, presenting breakthroughs more quickly than they would occur in practice. This is a narrative necessity, but it also highlights the gap between cinematic storytelling and real-world procedure. Ethical accuracy is perhaps the most complex area. The film explores moral ambiguity, which aligns with real-world dilemmas faced in covert operations. Decisions are rarely clear-cut, and outcomes often involve unintended consequences. By emphasizing this ambiguity, the film achieves a form of authenticity that goes beyond factual detail, capturing the essence of operating within uncertain and ethically challenging environments. Ultimately, the historical and scientific accuracy of In the Gray should be viewed not as a checklist of facts, but as a spectrum. It draws from reality to build credibility, then adapts that reality to serve its narrative goals. In doing so, it creates a world that feels believable, even if it is not entirely precise. And in that balance, the film succeeds in offering both educational value and cinematic engagement, inviting the audience to reflect on the systems and decisions that shape events beyond the screen. As the film moves into its visual language, what becomes increasingly evident is that cinematography in the Gray is not merely about capturing images, it is about engineering perception. Every frame is constructed to guide the viewer's emotional response, using light, composition, and movement as measurable variables. This is where storytelling transitions into visual data, where the camera becomes both observer and manipulator, translating abstract tension into something the audience can feel almost physically. Lighting design operates as the primary emotional driver. The film likely embraces a low-key lighting approach, where shadows dominate the frame and illumination is selectively applied. This creates high contrast ratios, allowing certain elements to emerge while others recede into darkness. From a technical standpoint, this involves careful control of exposure levels and dynamic range, ensuring that detail is preserved even in the darkest areas. Emotionally, it reinforces uncertainty, suggesting that truth is always partially hidden. Lens physics plays a crucial role in shaping spatial relationships. Wide-angle lenses can exaggerate depth, making environments feel expansive yet isolating, while telephoto lenses compress distance, creating a sense of surveillance and confinement. These choices are not arbitrary, they are aligned with narrative intent. When a character feels exposed, the frame may widen; when tension tightens, the frame compresses. This manipulation of space becomes a subtle but powerful storytelling tool. Composition geometry further refines this visual strategy. The placement of subjects within the frame, often off-center or partially obscured, can create a sense of imbalance. Negative space is used deliberately, allowing emptiness to carry meaning. Lines, whether architectural or environmental, guide the viewer's eye, directing attention without overt instruction. This is visual economics at work, where every element in the frame must justify its presence. Camera movement is treated with restraint and intention. Instead of constant motion, the film likely uses controlled, deliberate movements, slow pans, steady tracking shots, or subtle handheld sequences that introduce slight instability. Each movement is calibrated to match the emotional state of the scene. Smooth motion can create a sense of control, while irregular movement introduces unease. This alignment between motion and emotion ensures that the visual experience remains cohesive. Color science becomes another layer of narrative encoding. The film's palette is expected to lean toward desaturated tones, muted blues, grays, and earth tones, reinforcing its thematic identity. Color grading adjusts not just hue, but luminance and contrast, shaping how the audience perceives depth and texture. Small shifts in color temperature can signal changes in mood or perspective, creating a visual language that operates beneath conscious awareness. Depth of field is used as a psychological filter. A shallow depth of field isolates subjects, drawing attention to specific details while blurring the surrounding environment. This can emphasize focus, urgency, or introspection. Conversely, deeper focus allows multiple elements to remain sharp, creating a more observational feel. The choice between these approaches reflects the film's balance between subjective experience and objective reality. The interaction between foreground and background elements adds another dimension. Objects placed in the foreground can partially obscure the subject, creating layers within the frame. This not only adds visual depth but also reinforces the theme of obstruction, the idea that clarity is always mediated by perspective. It is a subtle technique, but one that contributes significantly to the film's overall atmosphere. Dynamic range, the camera's ability to capture both bright highlights and deep shadows, is particularly important in a film of this tone. High dynamic range allows for nuanced lighting conditions, where details are preserved across the spectrum. This technical capability supports the film's visual philosophy, ensuring that even in darkness, there is information, and even in light, there are limits. Framing decisions also reflect psychological states. Tight close-ups can create intimacy or discomfort, forcing the audience into close proximity with a character's emotions. Wider shots can introduce distance, allowing the viewer to observe rather than participate. The film likely alternates between these approaches, creating a rhythm that mirrors the ebb and flow of tension. Ultimately, the cinematography of In the Gray functions as a system of visual engineering, where every technical choice serves a narrative purpose. It is not about visual spectacle for its own sake, but about precision, using light, lenses, and composition to construct an experience that feels both controlled and uncertain. In doing so, the film transforms images into language, and that language becomes the medium through which its deeper themes are communicated. As the film transitions into its auditory dimension, what becomes clear is that sound in the Gray is not a supporting element, but a primary engine of immersion. Where visuals define what we see, sound defines what we feel. It operates beneath conscious awareness, shaping tension, guiding attention, and filling the spaces that images alone cannot reach. In a film rooted in ambiguity and psychological pressure, sound becomes the invisible architecture that holds the entire experience together. The foundation of this system lies in sound design, the construction of an auditory environment that feels both realistic and emotionally charged. Every scene is layered with ambient textures, distant machinery, subtle environmental noise, controlled silence, that create a sense of place. These elements are not random recordings, but carefully selected and mixed components designed to maintain continuity and immersion. Even in moments where nothing appears to be happening, sound ensures that the world remains alive. Dialogue recording and processing play a crucial role in maintaining clarity without breaking realism. On-set audio capture, often supplemented by ADR in post-production, ensures that speech remains intelligible even in complex environments. However, the film likely avoids overly polished dialogue, allowing slight imperfections to remain. This preserves authenticity, ensuring that conversations feel grounded rather than artificially clean. Mixing architecture, typically executed in advanced environments using tools like Avid Pro Tools, determines how these elements interact. Levels, frequencies, and spatial placement are all adjusted to create a balanced yet dynamic soundscape. Louder elements draw focus, while quieter layers provide depth. This is essentially audio hierarchy management, where each sound is positioned within a structured system to guide the listener's perception. One of the most powerful techniques in this film is likely the use of dynamic range. By allowing significant contrast between quiet and loud moments, the film creates a sense of unpredictability. Silence is not empty, it is tension waiting to be released. When sound does arrive, whether through sudden action or escalating noise, it carries greater impact because of what preceded it. This contrast becomes a tool for emotional manipulation, amplifying the audience's response. Spatial audio design adds another layer of immersion. Surround sound systems enable precise placement of audio within a three-dimensional field, allowing sounds to move around the viewer. Footsteps behind, distant echoes to the side, subtle shifts in direction, all contribute to a sense of presence. This is particularly effective in a film centered on surveillance and uncertainty, where the direction of sound can carry narrative significance. The musical score functions as an emotional guide, but with restraint. Instead of overwhelming the audience with constant orchestration, the film likely employs minimalistic compositions, low-frequency tones, sustained notes, and subtle rhythmic patterns. These elements create a baseline of tension that can be adjusted as the narrative evolves. Music does not dictate emotion, it suggests it, allowing the audience to interpret rather than react automatically. Instrumentation choices further reinforce the film's tone. Electronic textures, processed sounds, and unconventional instruments may be used to create a sense of modernity and unease. Traditional orchestral elements, if present, are likely subdued, integrated into the overall sound design rather than standing apart from it. This blending of music and sound design creates a unified auditory language. Silence, often overlooked, becomes one of the most effective tools. By removing sound at key moments, the film creates a vacuum that heightens awareness. The audience becomes more sensitive to even the smallest auditory cues, a breath, a movement, a distant noise. This controlled absence of sound is not a lack of design, but a deliberate choice, emphasizing the importance of what is not heard. Transitions between scenes are also shaped by sound. Audio bridges, where sound from one scene carries into the next, can create continuity or contrast. A calm ambient tone may suddenly give way to a harsher environment, signaling a shift in narrative energy. These transitions ensure that the film flows seamlessly, maintaining engagement across different sequences. Ultimately, the sound design and music production of In the Gray represent an investment in immersion, where every auditory element is engineered to support the film's psychological and emotional objectives. It is a system built on precision, where technology and creativity converge to produce an experience that is felt as much as it is heard. In this way, sound becomes not just an accompaniment to the image, but an equal partner in storytelling, shaping the film's impact in ways that extend far beyond the visible frame. As the film moves beyond production and into the marketplace, what unfolds is a carefully engineered marketing system, where creativity meets data, and storytelling extends far beyond the screen. In the Gray is not simply released, it is strategically introduced, positioned, and amplified through a series of calculated decisions designed to maximize visibility, engagement, and ultimately revenue. This phase transforms the film from a creative product into a market-facing asset, competing for attention in a saturated global landscape. The campaign likely begins with teaser content designed to establish tone rather than reveal narrative. These early assets function as emotional hooks, short, visually striking sequences that create curiosity without providing full context. From a data perspective, these teasers are tested across platforms, measuring engagement rates, completion percentages, and audience retention. This allows marketers to refine messaging before committing to larger-scale promotional efforts. Full trailers then expand on this foundation, introducing key plot elements, character dynamics, and moments of intensity. These trailers are often A/B tested, with different versions targeting specific demographics. One version may emphasize action and spectacle, while another highlights psychological depth and character conflict. By analyzing click-through rates and audience response, studios can optimize which version receives broader distribution. Audience segmentation plays a central role in this strategy. The film is likely positioned to appeal to multiple high-value segments: action enthusiasts, thriller audiences, and viewers interested in complex, character-driven narratives. In Tier 1 markets, where advertisers place a premium on educated and financially active audiences, this segmentation becomes even more important. By aligning the film with themes of strategy, psychology, and technology, the campaign attracts viewers who are more valuable from an advertising standpoint. Social media platforms serve as both distribution channels and data collection tools. Short-form clips, behind-the-scenes content, and cast interviews are released in a controlled sequence, each designed to maintain momentum and expand reach. Engagement metrics, likes, shares, comments, and watch time are continuously analyzed to adjust campaign direction. This creates a feedback loop where audience behavior directly influences marketing decisions in real time. Influencer partnerships further extend the film's reach. Content creators within the film analysis, action, and technology spaces may be engaged to produce reaction videos, breakdowns, or discussions. These collaborations are not random, they are selected based on audience overlap and engagement quality. The goal is to integrate the film into existing content ecosystems, allowing it to benefit from established trust and credibility. Paid advertising campaigns operate alongside organic reach, targeting specific user profiles based on browsing behavior, interests, and geographic location. Cost per thousand impressions, or CPM, becomes a key metric here. By focusing on demographics that attract premium advertisers, the campaign ensures that each marketing dollar is spent efficiently, maximizing both exposure and potential revenue. Release strategy also plays a critical role. The film may adopt a staggered rollout, premiering in key international markets before expanding globally. This allows studios to gauge performance, adjust marketing efforts, and build momentum through word of mouth. Early box office data serves as an indicator, guiding decisions on additional promotional investment. Data analytics continue to influence the film even after release. Audience feedback, critic reviews, and viewing patterns are monitored to identify strengths and weaknesses. This information can be used to adjust marketing messages, highlight specific aspects of the film, or even influence future projects. In this sense, the film becomes part of a larger data ecosystem, where each release contributes to a growing pool of insights. Cross-platform integration further enhances visibility. Streaming platforms, digital storefronts, and traditional media all play a role in extending the film's lifecycle. Promotional content is adapted for each platform, ensuring consistency while optimizing for different viewing behaviors. This multi-channel approach ensures that the film remains relevant beyond its initial release window. Ultimately, the marketing strategy of In the Gray is not just about attracting viewers, but about understanding them. It is a system built on data, analysis, and adaptation, where every decision is informed by measurable outcomes. By aligning creative messaging with audience behavior, the film maximizes its reach and its revenue potential, demonstrating that in modern cinema, success is as much about analytics as it is about artistry. As the film completes its journey from production to public reception, it enters a phase where perception becomes as important as performance. In the Gray, being an unreleased project, exists in a speculative space where its critical reception is not yet defined, but can be intelligently forecast based on genre trends, creative alignment, and industry patterns. This is where cinema transforms into cultural capital, where reviews, awards, and long-term legacy begin to shape the film's true value beyond immediate revenue. Critically, films that balance action with psychological depth tend to perform well among reviewers who value layered storytelling. If In the Gray successfully maintains its tonal discipline, avoiding excessive reliance on spectacle while preserving narrative coherence, it is likely to receive strong evaluations in areas such as direction, cinematography, and thematic execution. Critics often reward films that trust the audience, and this film's emphasis on ambiguity and restraint positions it favorably within that framework. However, this same complexity can create a divergence between critical and audience reception. General audiences, particularly those seeking clear resolutions and traditional hero structures, may find the film's ambiguity challenging. This creates a dual market dynamic, where the film may achieve high critical scores while generating more polarized audience reactions. From a financial perspective, this is not necessarily a disadvantage, as films with strong critical backing often sustain longer theatrical runs and stronger streaming performance. Awards potential is another dimension of this phase. While action thrillers are not traditionally dominant in major award categories, films that elevate the genre through technical excellence and thematic depth can break through. Cinematography, sound design, and editing are likely areas where the film could gain recognition. If performances are particularly strong, acting categories may also come into consideration, especially in awards bodies that appreciate nuanced, restrained portrayals. Film festivals could play a strategic role in shaping early perception. A premiere at a major festival, such as Venice, Toronto, or Cannes, would provide an opportunity to generate critical buzz before wide release. Positive early reviews can influence both audience expectations and distribution negotiations, effectively increasing the film's perceived value before it reaches the general market. From a branding perspective, the film contributes to the long-term positioning of everyone involved. Directors can reinforce their reputation for handling complex material, actors can expand their range, and studios can demonstrate their ability to produce content that appeals to both commercial and intellectual audiences. This reputational capital often translates into future opportunities and higher valuation for subsequent projects. The concept of legacy extends beyond immediate reception. Films that explore moral ambiguity and psychological complexity often gain appreciation over time, as audiences revisit them with greater context. Streaming platforms play a significant role here, allowing films to reach new viewers long after their theatrical run. This creates a second life for the film, where its value continues to grow through repeated engagement. Financially, this long-tail performance can be significant. While opening weekend numbers dominate headlines, sustained viewership over months and years contributes to overall profitability. Licensing deals, international distribution, and digital sales all add to this extended revenue stream. In this sense, the film's legacy is directly tied to its ability to remain relevant and engaging over time. Cultural impact is perhaps the most intangible yet powerful aspect of this phase. If the film successfully captures the complexities of modern conflict and human decision-making, it may influence how audiences perceive similar narratives in the future. It can shape conversations, inspire analysis, and become a reference point within its genre. This is where cinema moves beyond entertainment into the realm of discourse. There is also the potential for academic and educational engagement. Films that integrate psychological, technological, and economic themes often find their way into discussions in film studies, media analysis, and even business contexts. This expands the film's reach into high-value intellectual spaces, aligning with the kind of audience that drives premium advertising and long-term engagement. Ultimately, the reception, awards, and legacy of In the Gray will be determined not just by what it delivers, but by how it is interpreted. It exists at the intersection of art and industry, where critical opinion, audience response, and financial performance all contribute to its final position. And in that intersection, the film has the potential to evolve from a single release into a lasting presence within the cinematic landscape. And as the final echoes of the film begin to settle, what remains is not just a sequence of events, but a reflection of how systems, human, technological, and financial, converge to create meaning. In the Gray ultimately reveals itself as more than an action thriller. It is a study in balance, between control and chaos, between logic and emotion, between calculated risk and irreversible consequence. It reminds us that behind every operation, every decision, and every outcome, there is an intricate network of forces shaping what unfolds. What makes the film particularly compelling is how seamlessly it integrates art, technology, and capital into a single narrative experience. The story draws us in emotionally, the technology sustains immersion, and the financial structure ensures its existence in the first place. These are not separate elements, but interconnected systems, each influencing the other. The budget defines the scale, the technology defines the execution, and the storytelling defines the impact. Throughout the film, we see how uncertainty becomes the defining condition of both the characters and the world they inhabit. Decisions are made without complete information, outcomes are rarely predictable, and consequences often extend beyond immediate control. This mirrors not just the environment within the film, but the broader realities of modern systems, whether in business, governance, or personal life. In that sense, the film becomes a lens through which we can examine our own relationship with risk and responsibility. The emotional core of the film lies in its exploration of cost, not just financial cost, but the cost of choice. Every action carries a price, sometimes visible, sometimes hidden. The characters are constantly negotiating these costs, often without the luxury of reflection. This creates a tension that feels both immediate and universal, reminding us that the most significant decisions are often made under pressure, with incomplete understanding. From a technological perspective, the film demonstrates how innovation can enhance storytelling without overshadowing it. Cameras, lenses, sound design, and post-production workflows all work in harmony to support the narrative. Technology becomes a silent partner, enabling the story to be told with precision and depth. This is a reminder that the true value of technology lies not in its visibility, but in its ability to disappear into the experience. Financially, the film stands as an example of how cinema operates as an industry. It is a product of investment, strategy, and calculated risk, where success is measured not just in artistic terms, but in ROI, audience reach, and long-term value. Yet, despite this structured foundation, the film retains a sense of unpredictability, reflecting the very themes it explores. It is both a controlled system and a creative gamble. There is also a quiet commentary on human adaptability. The characters are forced to evolve, to adjust their strategies, their beliefs, and their identities in response to changing circumstances. This adaptability becomes their greatest strength, but also their greatest challenge, as it requires them to constantly redefine who they are within the system they serve. As viewers, we are invited not just to observe, but to interpret. The film does not provide easy answers or clear resolutions. Instead, it leaves space for reflection, encouraging us to consider the implications of what we have seen. This openness is not a weakness, but a strength, allowing the film to resonate beyond its runtime. In the broader context of cinema, In the Gray represents a convergence of disciplines. It is where storytelling meets engineering, where psychology meets economics, and where art meets industry. This convergence is what defines modern filmmaking, a collaborative process that draws from multiple fields to create a unified experience. And perhaps that is the film's most lasting contribution. It reminds us that behind every story lies a system, and within every system lies a story. By examining both, the film offers a deeper understanding of how narratives are constructed, not just on screen, but in the world around us. If you found this deep dive meaningful, my literature-loving friends, consider liking and subscribing so we can keep decoding the business and beauty of cinema together.